friends. Welcome back to another episode of the unofficial companion podcast to HBO Max's hit show, Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Wall Street Skinny, two lifelong friends, former investment bankers, and teachers who are here to break down everything in your favorite show, from the finance to the romance, and give you the skinny on what's real and what's Hollywood. Okay, Kristen, what is the title of our episode today?
It's called Kitchen Season. I literally was looking up, does this have some secret meaning? Because the only thing I can think is
figure it out.
Is there's the brother works in a kitchen? Like
there's a lot of different scenes that take place in kitchens.
Yes.
There's the scene with Yasmin and her dad, the scene with Yasmin and Teresa, and also the scene with Harper, and we'll get to it. Someone who we've been waiting to have been revealed. I mean, the most annoying plot line as far as I'm concerned.
It's so interesting, though, because like the themes of the episode were perfectionism, striving for achievement, problematic family, breaking sobriety. So like I thought that the title would have something to do with that.
For the life of me, couldn't figure it out.
Nope.
All right. So where do we start?
We're starting in a car. So the episode opens with DVD and Harper like hooking up in a car. I think they're in a Lamborghini. Because then Rishi shows up being an asshole, also in his Lamborghini, and like parks diagonal across their spaces, which I thought was classic asshole move.
So they get out of the car. They're like, oh gosh, Rishi's pulling into this garage. He's going to catch us hooking up in this car. Why didn't they just hide in the car? Rishi's so concerned with Rishi. He's parking diagonally across 3 spaces.
It's true.
Why do they need to come out of the car, adjusting their hair, zipping up their pants, and revealing their relationship to him? As someone who has dated their coworker, like this is 101. You don't arrive to the office at the same time, right? Like there are
in the same car while hooking up in the car.
Yeah, exactly. So like I know they did. That was an unnecessary reveal.
They get out of the car and Rishi says to DVD, like, "Oh, I didn't see you on the Christmas promotion list."
I really want to dive into that comment. At banks, the annual MD promotions, that's a big deal. Unlike other promotions to associate and VP and executive director or director, whatever you want to call it, MD nominations come on a much less standard time frame. It's not like 2 years and then you're promoted to this, 2 years and then you're automatically going to get MD at some point. The absolute rock star fastest path from analyst to MD in an investment bank is, at the very, 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 very shortest, maybe 7 years. It would be incredibly rare for someone in a more structured role like investment banking or a role like sales where you're not directly responsible for P&L to get there that quickly. It's typically reserved for like a rock star trader who like they are so afraid of losing to the buy side that they really want to promote them up.
I had a 29-year-old MD when I was working in CDOs at Morgan Stanley. He also was the first one to get fired, but he was 29.
Yeah, it's very, very unusual.
But remember what was happening at the time. It was 2007 CDOs.
They were the hot
money
thing.
And they were printing money. So, but again, he also was fired first.
But yeah, I think a more reasonable timeline for someone who's, again, super high performing and well liked politically, maybe 10 years. And even then, making MD that quickly is still a big deal. If you don't get any breaks or fast tracks or you aren't a superstar, it's more like a 12 to 15 year process. And that's still a big accomplishment. Some people never make MD. It's not a given on your career path the same way it is up or out at like the associate level or the VP level. And if there are already a ton of MDs on your desk, it hurts your chances of being given the title because then you are this super top heavy group.
Right.
So the actual process of being nominated for MD, your manager has to put you up for it. And then there are so many other people at the firm who typically have to weigh in on that promotion actually going through. At some banks, you need buy-in from like highly ranked individuals in other divisions of the firm to show that you have wide-reaching support. So it happens occasionally that people get nominated for MD and then shut down. That's harsh, and that does happen. So it's not clear whether or not DVD was nominated and then rejected or just never nominated at all. But obviously, he's pretty disappointed. And he said, time must not have been right.
Yeah, but then Harper says to Rishi, haven't you been in ED for 10 years? Which I do think is wild to your point, because you're like, if you're a hotshot trader, they might promote you quickly. He's their only trader? So like, what?
Yes. So exactly. Given the context that I just gave you, for the hotshot trader, who, like you said, seems to be the only risk taker at the firm, to still be an executive director after 10 years in the seat, That's telling about Rishi's political position at the firm. And also, how old is Rishi, by the way? Because even if he slow rolled,
he looks
right,
like he's in his 40s.
Maybe you're an ED by 30. Yeah, maybe 35, 32 or something like that as a trader. So is he 45 and clearly like de facto running the desk, but so politically unpopular that he can't make it happen? Has he blown up before? Like, that's a big deal and big insight for people in the know.
Yeah, but they keep talking about bids away. I mean, they talked about it with Eric earlier. You thought that Harper was considering leaving, and then he also says that those C words, I feel like, I guess the cat's out of the bag. I keep saying the stupid word, but if those C words don't make me an MD soon, I'll hit a bid away. But they also,
most traders would have been interviewing for like the past 5 years in that situation,
right,
if they weren't getting promoted to ED. Like,
well,
so that tells us he probably doesn't have a bid away if he's still stuck there.
It's funny because we did an interview with one of my friends from college who was a Goldman Sachs options trader, and he left at some point. So he kind of missed the window where you're usually going to be getting those most lucrative, quote unquote, bids away when you're a little younger. He's 40, he's like us, and he's one of the brightest people that I know, and he's very good at his job. But he was like, once you've been on the sell side as a trader for a while, like it actually becomes hard because being a market maker is such a specific thing. So I also just thought that that was interesting. Like it's probably not that easy for him to move, even if he wanted to.
Well, he'd be moving,
but
exactly. At that point, when he's so deeply established, he's unlikely to be moving to the buy side. He'd probably just be trading roles within banks like Ennis, to your point, who worked at 6 different banks.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he just took another job at another bank. So I saw that on LinkedIn. But anyway, they also then say, well, who's officially running the desk? Because now we thought it was going to be DVD. Obviously, that is not happening. Eric is gone. And so it seems like nobody is.
They all just look at each other, yeah.
Yeah, they all just look at each other. And then they say, I never had Eric pegged as a baby kisser. I never knew he wanted that role. And so that's kind of obviously a reference to politics, the baby kissing, and like what Eric is doing. And DVD says you never really know someone because he obviously pushed Eric up, so to speak. And Rishi says, well, there's always the possibility he got pushed up or out. And Harper's sitting there kind of thinking about it. But the point is, she doesn't know what DVD did. Like she's not.
But Harper stabbed him in the back too. Like Harper.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. No, it's not.
Stabbed Eric.
That's true. It's not that like she was this saint, but I think the fact that they zoomed in on her having a thought about that just shows that DVD probably didn't open up to her that happened. That was all. It was more like that was kind of a secret that he wasn't.
Well, yeah.
sharing.
Remember too, in the last episode, he was presenting himself so heavily as like, you get what you get with me, you know, like, you know who I am face value. But actually, she doesn't have full insight into who he is, that he was working so closely with Adler to displace Eric so that ultimately he could potentially rise within the group.
With that said, I do think they are starting to show that even though it's only been one episode, DVD has some kind of feelings because he says to her as they're about to leave, like, can I be vulnerable? And she thinks for a moment like he might be going to say, I love you. But he says, car's only a lease, because he has this, like, again, kind of sick Lamborghini. But the fact that they even threw that out there, I think was like trying to show that like they were getting maybe a little bit serious, which ultimately becomes a thing at the very end with how
there's also
she ultimately treats him.
A little like minor point in here where Rishi's talking about his car and he's like, yeah, I got it from a divorced dad. Having a distressed seller is important. And I thought it was so interesting in the context of learning about Yasmin's dad and the divorce that he's going through and how he's trying to stay liquid and liquidate his assets. So it was just top of mind for me thinking about the stresses that divorce and breakups put on people, both in a professional and a personal setting.
Yeah. So next scene, we're with Yaz and her dad. Her dad's like cooking food and giving it to her.
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. There you go. And he makes this comment. He gives her like a quiche and he says, a tasty financier for a tasty financier. I think that's very strange to call your daughter.
Is a baked good, not a quiche. So it's like a not like a muffin.
Oh, a financier is an actual type of a thing. It's like a scone.
It's an actual type of like a cookie, like a baked good. Yeah. But he does it in such a creepy way. He like moves towards her with it in his hand, like he's going to feed it to her. And she grabs it from him so that she can feed herself. Like she's not a child, but it also just reads bizarrely sexual almost to me. Maybe it's just.
Nope. I'm not going to say more, but yeah, no. Yes.
Like, ew, who says that to their daughter?
Yes. Yes. This was not an accident.
So he says, Yasmin's mom, in the divorce proceedings, he has given her rights to their Samoritz chateau, which is like a ski chalet in Switzerland. So he then makes this joke, Azar has taken Gaza. So I had to look this up. Per the credits of the show, Yasmin's mom's name is Azar Kara. So he's likening their divorce proceedings to the endless war and fighting over the most contested land in the world between the Israelis and the Palestinians, likening their Samoritz ski chalet to the Gaza Strip. Now, this was filmed and aired before the most recent war, but nonetheless speaks to his like horribly glib attitude comparing their divorce to that war. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's insane. So he calls it Gazar as a portmanteau with her name.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense because I was just confused by that statement and I was like, I have no idea what you're trying to say, but that clarifies things. And yeah.
That's how I took it. Again, if anyone interpreted it differently, please let me know.
She also then says her mother has blocked her on everything because she's upset that Yaz has let her dad back into her life. And she then thanks him for letting her stay at their place in Berlin. She says there's one last handover that has to happen on the FX desk before she can officially be in PWM and on the, again, PWM Hanani account. So,
well, when she says she blocked me for letting you back in, he goes, you've let me back in? Like, oh my gosh, like this is the amazing thing I think it is between the two of us. And she's like, well, I've got this business thing, but also it's giving us insight into how immaturely Yasmin's mom is handling this whole thing, by the way, because it's one thing to punish your spouse whom you're divorcing, who clearly is a terrible person, but Yasmin's mom is punishing her for having a relationship with her dad. This is such a common thing and such a terrible thing where parents use the children as weapons in that fighting. And I know Yasmin's an adult child, but it's still incredibly hurtful. And I know, like, again, Yasmin is like so tortured and problematic in so many ways, but that's awful.
Oh, yeah. So she then comments how it's going to be weird being back there in Berlin. And her memories of Berlin are of techno and the walls thumping, which is, again, interesting because like there is like a scene later where like they're in like a club and it's like techno, like blah, 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 and like literally you can't even talk over how loud it is. But she then comments, I'm glad you finally learned the art of self-control and at least paid someone to watch over me. And then says she should look up Teresa, who I guess was her babysitter, who whenever she would be in Berlin. And Charles acts like he doesn't know who that is. He's like, Teresa? And Yaz is like, yeah, my nanny out there. Like, you must remember, she came with us everywhere. And he kind of just acts like he doesn't know who it is. And then changes the subject and says, well, aren't they going to put you in some swanky hotel? Which is like,
he gets super weird when she mentions Teresa. Yeah. And like, after being like, why don't you stay at our pied-à-terre in Berlin? It's like, well, why don't you stay at a hotel the company's putting out? But like, why did you suddenly change your tune the second you mentioned this nanny?
Exactly. She is like, no, they're going to put me at a Marriott. It's going to be some stupid hotel that I don't want to stay at. Is there a problem with me using it? And he basically finally is just kind of like, no, because he doesn't want to, I think, tip his hand that something is up. So next scene, we're back on the trading floor with the CPS desk. And obviously there's no leader, so to speak. So DVD turns to Harper and says, when was the last time we had a huddle? And Harper says, not since Eric moved up. So DVD then says like, all right, let's have a little powwow. And in the background, you hear Kenny screaming, asking if anyone's seen his creatine powder. But he basically says he knows that everything's been disjointed since Eric's promotion. And while nothing has been finalized, that everyone can report to him. So he's kind of just like standing in.
Have you all report to me?
Yeah.
By the way, like, talk about unrealistic. First of all, Adler would have installed someone in place. And again, it's noticeable that there's this MD power vacuum on the desk. Last time in season 1, when Eric was booted, they had Daria, who was a VP. At that point, seize control with Sarah's backing. Now we've got an executive director seizing control, which is a little closer to reality, but still unlikely. They'd either probably give him that battlefield promotion that we know he hasn't been given, or move another MD into the role. Like there is, by the way, a total vacuum of MDs at this bank.
So Rishi then pipes in and is like, well, does Eric's promotion free up our payment pool? Asking if there's then more money to go around for all of them. But he also asked what it means for London. Because remember, we found out in the very beginning of the season that they're considering basically combining CPS London and New York and shutting one of them down. So they're a little bit worried about who's going to come out on top and how does Eric moving affect all that. And DVD is just like, look, we basically got to keep, getting orders in. He's like, I know it's standard operating procedure to hit cruise control in December, but like, we got to keep seeing the flows. Like every dollar counts.
Let me
Rishi
explain what
then-
that means,
yeah,
by the way,
yeah,
and why
perfect.
this is wrong.
Awesome.
So Rishi asking for whether or not this frees up room in the bonus pool is absurd. Okay. Bonuses have already been announced, first of
That's
all.
true. That's
In this
true.
world. The numbers are done. The numbers are basically set in
And
stone.
he was paid. We're
As-
like, no, Eric was paid.
Like, none of this makes sense. Now, to DVD's point, there is this, since your bonus numbers are set in stone in the beginning of December, but you don't find them out until January, February, March, why would you deliberately earn any money between like December 1st and December 31st? Now, it's your job, right? You have to maximize value to the shareholders. But at the same time, all that's going to do is set your budget so high that next year, when they say, oh, well, we have to increase your budget because they increase your budget every year, it starts you off from a higher starting point. So I do think there's kind of this known thing that people really try to push all their good flow into January so that you hit the ground running in the new year. Yeah. So he's acknowledging that happens. But to say that you're doing that for the purpose of boosting your pay, which is already set in stone and in this world has already been allocated, makes no sense.
Yeah. So Rishi then adds and says this to Harper. Rumor has it your girl Yaz is taking equity sales to Berlin to hand over the Future Dawn account to Jackie Walsh. Obviously, Harper's ears perk up because she knows her brother's in Berlin. And Rishi says, of all fucking people, I can't believe they still let that hoodlum in front of clients, obviously referring to Jackie. And we've seen Jackie rough around the edges. It is interesting because we will later see kind of how she does compose herself in meetings. And so I actually kind of liked that they did that. But anyway, Harper then is like, well, I should be going, right? Because she wants to now be on this trip to Berlin to possibly see her brother. So she's like, I have the best line into Anna since the right can't shoot. I should be on that trip. I want to bump the equities guy off and poach Anna for our desk. And DVD's like, I love the tenacity, but CRMS has to sign off on that. I can't reassign equity coverage, but Eric can. And then he's like, do you really want to go up there? And Harper's just like, sure, why not?
The senior relationship management can't reassign equity coverage to the cross-product sales desk. Like, that is not within their power. That is not something that they could ever do. So we have to suspend some disbelief here. That's just simply not how it works. But again, we're in the world of industry where everyone trades everything and all roles are fungible. So whatever.
Yep. Next thing we do see Harper go up to Eric's office and there's some dude in there who's like hanging a picture. And Eric looks up at Harper and like he actually has this like slight smile on on his face when he sees her. I think he just like is bored and he just wants company and he wants to see somebody.
He's like, oh God, I'm important.
I see somebody. So he's like, Harper Stern. And Harper says, I assume from your new 300,000 foot view of client relationships, you have the granularity on what client interactions are the most lucrative. And Eric is just kind of talking, like he doesn't even like acknowledge that. He's like, they sent me a binder full of art. I can choose whatever I like. And then he points at this picture on the wall and asks if she thinks it's tasteful. Now, I took a picture of it and I uploaded it into ChatGPT because I was so curious. I was like, is this a like famous photo that they've picked? It's per AI, it is not. It
was like a picture of clowns, right?
So you thought it was clowns. I couldn't tell what it was. I thought it was just like people.
It looked like people in like court jester outfits. So I took that to mean as like how ridiculous he thinks this role is. And I think what he's doing is by showing Harper the absurdity of what his life is like now. I've been asked to go through a binder of art and select the paintings to decorate my office versus like hard-hitting P&L, trade ideas, moving mountains, right? Shaking the world up. He's decorating an office, which is ironic too, because it harkens back to what he was asking Gus to do. If you remember, when Gus wanted to be elevated within the group, he was like, why don't you choose the color for my den in my house or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So like now it just shows the frivolity of that because she's overstating the value of the role. Like, well, you have this, eagle eye view over the whole firm. And he's like, I'm decorating an office with stupid art.
Yeah. So Harper then is trying to ask him if she can be put on this Berlin trip. She's like, there's this FX trip to Berlin to meet Anna Gearing. I was wondering if you could bump equities and send me instead. Eric replies, just so I'm clear, you want me to reassign equity coverage on one of the biggest equity accounts from the equity sales desk to you, a non-equity salesperson. Harper says, yeah. And Eric just replies, sure, I can do that. So
I love how they were just acknowledging for the viewer the absolute absurdity of this plot line, because that's what they're doing, right? Eric's like, you want me to do what? Like,
but I also think it shows how little he gives a shit. Like, that's the other point. He's like, this is so absurd.
To do it, that he would do it anyways.
Because he's like, I don't fucking care. Like, you guys just did this to me. Sure, I'll do it. Like, why not? I, don't really give a shit about anything anymore. This is all just a clown show. Going back to the painting. Yeah. So next scene, we're now back down in a conference room with Kenny and Yaz, and there's a Christmas tree up in the corner. So we know that this is sort of like our Christmas episode, which makes sense because they obviously have just done bonuses and all that. And Kenny says, I'm so sorry to have to pull you off the desk. Didn't want to intimidate you. And Yaz is just like, you're not intimidating me. But again, given their history, right? Like he's being so like overly like, I don't want to, And he says, it's quite a sensitive subject. And then he grabs this, I think was comic relief. He grabs this croissant and tries to eat it. He's like, stale, decorative maybe. I actually almost started crying laughing because I just thought
it's also
funny.
Good contrast between the financier, like the freshly baked, delicious baked good in the private wealth management world of Yasmin dealing with her father versus the stale croissants that might be an art object.
Yeah. And Kenny then explains to her that Wyndham is very sick. So he was in the early episodes of this season, like the hypochondriac, mask, gloves, like crazy. But he's actually in the hospital. And so Kenny says he's through the worst with it, but he needs everyone to pull together in his absence because they're obviously down one man. And Yaz is like, look, Kenny, I'm sorry Wyndham's sick, but I'm not making up the shortfall. I'm going to Berlin to do this trip, to do the handoff. But after that, I'm out. And Kenny says, we can't afford the client churn with Wyndham gone. It makes us look like we need a daddy. I'd hate to have to jeopardize you move to PWM, but if Jackie and Anna don't jive, I'm going to have to keep you here to cover her. It wouldn't be my doing. The last thing I want to do is to keep you from being happy. This would just be the needs of the business, which I do believe like he is true, but Yaz is so done with this. It does set up the need for Anna to like Jackie, which
how
puts
high
a little
the
extra
stakes
pressure.
of the trip are for Yaz. And I also think it's interesting that he used the phrase, we don't want to look like we need a daddy.
I thought so too.
I think if you recall, back in episode 1 of this season, I think it was called Daddy.
That was the title of the whole episode, yeah.
And then we've got what's going on with Yasmin's actual father being like the underlying theme of everything happening. She needs a daddy to get her into PWM. Otherwise, she doesn't get entree into that group if she doesn't land her dad.
Oh, that's such a good point.
You know what I'm saying? So like,
point. Yeah.
Everyone needs a daddy. And it's really interesting to see how the two different teams are handling the power vacuum. Kenny, who was like the asshole of season 1, is like, we need to band together as a team. Nobody is like rushing in to fill the power vacuum that Wyndham has left in FX. Everyone's like, we all need to chip in and do our part. Whereas DVD is using it as a total power grab in CPS, right? It's like two totally different worlds with the new reformed Kenny.
Yeah. So next scene, we have DVD come up to Robert and he says, Axio undergrad talent. I was confused by this because it was so out of place. So again, I actually had to look this up and then it reminded me that it's from Harry Potter.
Yeah. Which is also because Hogwarts is like so Oxford-y,
True. Although interesting, I guess like my brother, because he moved to Scotland and he's saying that it's basically supposed to be based on somewhere in Scotland. But like I feel like Harry Potter comes up a few times. Either that or J.K. Rowling wrote it in Scotland. Like somehow it was like Scotland inspired. So there's like Hogwarts museums and stuff in Scotland. I need to look up exactly what that is, but I was like, I thought it was London.
DVD said something in this little bit referring to one of the buildings on the Oxford campus having like a same name as something.
Yeah, I was surprised because I was like, I'm pretty sure that Hogwarts and Harry Potter is all London based, but there's something to do with Scotland. Fun fact, Jen is the one who made me read Harry Potter when I was a teenager because I was like, this is a kid's book. I'm not reading this stupid book. And you're like, it's so good. And I'm so glad I did because I love it. So,
so just to be clear, this is a recruiting trip.
Yes. Yeah. And so DVD specifically says, there is one particular girl we want you to pay attention to. And then he kind of corrects himself. He's like, undergraduate, Daphne Mason. So he says, she was on our radar over spring week. The president of the union, McKinsey, Goldman, the Foreign Office all made her offers. And DVD says, I want her on this desk and it will be smoother coming from someone closer in her age. Go on this recruiting dinner, get her fed, put a cap on her head. Imagine you're John Gruden and you want to make her a Raider, but something she might actually go for. So this is a reference to like American football.
Pause.
Okay.
So I, of course, went through and screenshotted her resume. First of all, what is this absurd resume formatting? Guys, for those of you who haven't downloaded our resume template, this is like a classic example of what not to do. It is like a colorful pink, black, gray, white, lots of blocks of text with background. It is absurdly formatted and difficult to read. It is not the finance resume that you have to very strictly abide by when you're applying for finance roles. Also, the details of her qualifications, it's like the most British sounding shit ever. It literally does sound like Harry Potter. She was voted head girl. She got the Henry Wilde Prize in Philosophy, the Elizabeth Aviscombe Thesis Prize. She worked in a strategy internship in fixed income strategy. And then for DVD, to have first been like, you went to Oxford, like Harry Potter, right? British school. And then to make a John Gruden
Well, because remember,
reference.
he's from New York. So just
he's American.
Like a quick, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for him to make a John Gruden reference is just showing how he's like such a fish out of water culturally compared to, in his mind, the Robert, right, who comes from the British culture, the elite collegiate background, all that fun stuff. It's basically kind of a dick move, showing he doesn't understand anything about Robert.
Oh, 100%. But then he also says, charm her, interpret that how you will. Feel free to bring a grad, maybe the girl in FX. Again, sorry, woman. But it seems like he's basically almost telling him that he can like sleep with her to get her to come to Pierpoint. Like that's how I interpreted it. It's like, hey, we're going to send the attractive, I mean, great, DVD's attractive too, but like, you know, the younger, attractive
than Robert.
Fair.
Robert's so skinny.
So anyway, next scene, we're in Aurora's office. Gus is there and she walks in and she's surprised. She's like, I've never seen anyone here before 9 a.m. She's like, once a banker, always a banker, which is kind of true. Like that's Gus's personality. And so she closes the door and she says that she's been asked to be the new Minister of State for Technology and Health. And then she goes on and says, this stays between these four walls, but this is going to be really important. She says, Amazon is a breath away from acquiring every fast aid in the UK. I'm going to be chairing the anti-competition committee around it. And Gus is like, do you have a dog in the fight? Aurora replies, personally, I think Rycan is a better suited landing place for these NHS contracts than whatever the hybrid Amazon is planning with fast aid. I don't think we need a physical location for this technology rollout. Point is, I want you to take the work on the prep for the committee. But this, in reality, Amazon did acquire One Medical, which we talked about. I wonder if this is kind of them saying that, but ultimately this is very bad for the investment that Jesse has in Rycan, because the whole thesis of that last episode, if you remember, was basically buy Rycan, but also buy more of it and like become the major shareholder.
Short this other thing.
I forgot they said, yeah.
Remember, Harper was like, the whole thing is do what they don't want you to do. They're telling you to go buy fast aid.
Yeah.
You need to get max short and go do it with my competitor. Remember? Because she was like, the best idea wins and it's mine.
And which again was like purely because she was trying to just throw DVD under the bus. But this would be very, very bad because the whole thesis of even like the turnaround play for Rycan, it was like take the hit in the short term, lower the pricing, right? Squeeze the margins, but land these NHS contracts so you become the telemedicine play. If Amazon buys fast aid, I mean, there's not a shot in hell for Rycan. So we now know that there's obviously something that is very bad potentially from an investment perspective, but also Anna has a investment in Rycan. And remember, Aurora and Rycan and Anna are pretty close. I'm not saying that Aurora is going to tip her off or anything, but now, I mean, Aurora does have a dog in the fight.
And Gus has the material non-public inside information that Harper needs to know.
Yes.
So that's what I thought they were setting up here. I didn't even think about Aurora's connection to Anna. I forgot that they were so close.
Yeah. And again, I actually don't even remember if there is anything with that, but the material non-public information is obviously like huge.
Because I was wondering where they were going with Gus being part of this whole political office, because I was like, sorry, but like, don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
So I was like, where are they going with this? And I was like, oh, okay. It's that he's got access to the inside information that's going to swing everything for whatever's going on with their investment.
100%. 100%. So next scene, we're with Robert. And someone named Jack Love calls, and this is, and asks to speak with Robert Spearing. And the guy on the phone says he's trying to tie up some loose ends for Clement Cowan. He's the executor of his estate. And so this is basically us finding out that Clement has died, which is not really that surprising. Like he was an addict when they fired him. I mean, he basically was like, I need the structure, I need the stability. And obviously, I mean, Daria didn't give a shit. But Robert, his heart sinks here. And he says, sorry, can you remind me when they're having the funeral? And then he says it's that afternoon. So Robert's going to Oxford, so obviously he can't go. But it's just, we now find out that Clement has died. And so this is someone who honestly was a little bit like a father figure. So it's interesting that when we go to Oxford, like who Robert's going to see, but this is this huge dagger in the heart to Robert at this point in time.
Yeah, I love how empathetic you are and how much like this grieves you. I literally wrote in my notes, Clement's dead.
It was more just because he was
like,
the one person who had taken an interest in Robert. I feel like
100%.
Robert we're going to find out more about his family life. And it's not so much I care about Clement. I care about Robert and I want him to do well. And it makes me sad. This was someone he felt like cared about him, was looking out for him. And like we see, because it also, like he unravels later in this episode. And like, I think this was just the first thing to cause those dominoes to fall. Mm-hmm. So next scene we have Harper. Well, Harper's in Berlin. Jackie and Yasmin show up in this black SUV. And Jackie just looks at her and she's like, you're not Birdie Inequities. And Jackie says she's not going to trade FX through your CPS desk while I cover her. And Yas paves in because, again, she just wants everything to go smoothly. So she's like, I told you, Jackie, you're the stranger here. I have a relationship with Anna. Harper has a relationship with Anna. We just need a smooth transition while I move to PWM. We'll flank you. We'll sing your praises. Let us do the talking. And Jackie replies, you girls don't even know when you're born. If I pulled a stunt like this back when I was a third year, you have no idea what the men on my desk would have called me. And so it's interesting because remember, we left last episode with Harper and Yaz not on the best of terms. Yaz was trying to come hat in hand. Harper wanted nothing to do with it. But now she is on this trip, which is almost like because of Yaz. And now she's staying at Yaz's place. So next thing, they all walk into Yasmin's apartment. And Harper says to Yaz,
stunning apartment I have ever seen in my life. To think about this in the middle of continental Europe, I cannot fathom how much this must have cost. It looks like an art gallery. It's got views of treetops. I cannot imagine how many tens of millions of dollars this pied-à-terre must have cost.
She literally says that. Harper's like, you didn't have to let me stay here. It's incredible. She's like, oh, it's just a pied-à-terre. You know, our housekeeper still comes every day because my dad didn't want to essentially like stop paying her. So she comes to clean an empty place that doesn't need to be cleaned.
Why would he keep paying a housekeeper to clean an apartment? We know that he's paying off several women in his life. You don't have to do much mental gymnastics to wonder if this housekeeper was one of the many female victims that he's discussed.
Yeah. So Harper's in there. She's like looking at all the photos. Jackie's looking at the art. And she makes an interesting statement. She says, doesn't matter how much money I earn, they'll never let me in these circles. So Harper then picks up a picture of Yaz. And it's like, who's this person in the picture? She looks very close to your family, your dad, whatever. And Yaz is like, our nanny, Teresa. And she says, I think she's Maxim's third cousin. And Harper's just like, I bet your mom didn't like her being around. Sorry, bad joke. And Yaz is like, well, on the same holiday, I walked in on my mom giving head to the guy we chartered the boat from. Fuck, I'd forgotten about that. And Harper kind of looks shocked. And she's like, I thought your dad was the away from home guy. And Yaz replies, Jax and I are thinking about getting dinner later. So she's trying to change the subject. And Harper then is trying to sway them to go to this restaurant where she thinks her brother is. So she's like, well, how about instead of going to wherever you guys were thinking, let's go to this like random place that she thinks looks good to try. So Yasmin and Jackie were just like, sure. And at the end of the scene, Yaz picks up the picture and she's sort of looking at it. So we know that something's not sitting right with her. Mm-hmm. So next scene, Venetia and Robert are walking together at Oxford. Robert says, I had, I guess, a mentor is the right word. It sounds a bit arcane. He was a junkie, actually, a heroin addict, white collar, high functioning. And you know, I never really knew whether to emulate him or pity him. He was a fucking riot, amazing salesperson. He was the first aspirational man I had in my life. And then Venetia talks about how it's a weird feeling for her to be back here all the time because she worked like a dog. And he says, did you get an honors degree? Mm-hmm. And she says, I wanted one, though my mom wanted me to get one more, like immigrant mentality. Robert says, try growing up here. We moved down from Hull when I was a kid for my dad's work. I think that's why my mom wanted me to get into Oxford so badly. She died around the time I had my interviews, and it's funny. All I remember is that I needed to get in. Like, it was the only way I could think to honor her. And my dad couldn't give two fucks. He's not really made for this sort of stuff, probably why she left him. And so Venetia asks if he still lives here, and Robert doesn't reply. Venetia then says that she had to take a year off from school because she was working so hard that she basically had a breakdown. And she says to Robert, you must have been pissed out of your skull for 3 years, which is, I love like the terminology in the US. We don't use the word pissed. We just use the word drunk. But Robert says, you've never seen me take a drink. And she says, yeah, but I've spoken to enough people to like know what you used to be like. And she says, it sounds like you were a lot of fun. And Robert's like, yeah, well, I had to sing for my supper. I was either hungover or singing, actually, or pissed singing or singing while anticipating being pissed. I was in the choir at Christ Church. And she's just like, no way. And he says, yeah, I'm just winding you up. And Venetia then says she loved going there and she might go there for communion tomorrow. So
yeah. So, I mean, you're like, is this a lie? Is this not? Were you really a choir boy, Robert? And like, when you think of a choir boy, right, you think of someone who is this like meek, vulnerable, like it's
Saint.
not this like, yeah, exactly. But he was the one who was drunk all the time. So it's like, okay, which is it? Is Robert the hard partying guy? And it's kind of this duality, I think, in how he's spoken about Clement too. It's like, oh, he was so aspirational, but he was also a heroin addict. It's like, I was, to your point, a choir boy, a saint, right? This little like model of perfection or whatever, this very like by the rules, prim and proper. But I was also drunk all the time. So like, I think there's that duality that he's hinting at. And we still don't know if he actually was or not at this point. Like, was he just fucking with her?
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, he obviously would have had to work hard given he didn't have that kind of privileged background to get into a place like Oxford. So there must have been some of that when he was saying it was really important to his mom, blah, blah, blah. But it's so funny because it does, to me, go against the image that I always had of him of being this drunk fuck up, like didn't give a crap about school, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like it's painting this other picture of him, which actually like had to have been sort of true because he had to have gotten into Oxford to begin with. So anyway. Now we're back in Berlin and Yaz, Harper, they're all there. Jackie's there. And Harper's looking around the restaurant for her brother. Meanwhile, Yaz is on the phone and she's like, Anna postponed the meeting and wants to push it tomorrow afternoon. So Jackie says, this is a happy accident. We can all get to know each other. And the girls are kind of like, yeah, no thanks. No. And Jackie, I think, is sort of hurt, but like also like wants to like put on this front. She's like, that's fine. Like I don't want to be here anyway. I'm going to go out and like, basically,
she's like,
go to prostitute.
Hang out with you? Like, why would I want to hang out with you coworkers anyways, right? Like,
yes.
I don't like you anyways.
Yeah.
She definitely wanted to.
Oh, yeah, she definitely did. I actually felt bad for her there.
Me too.
And so Jackie leaves and Yaz is there and she's sending a photo, that photo that Harper had initially shared with her. Yaz had taken a picture and now she's sending it to her dad. And she says, you and Teresa look close. And Harper is still very preoccupied looking for her brother. And Yaz says to her, should we get another bottle? Well, we don't have to if you don't feel up for it. And Harper just looks at her and Yaz is like, is it something I said? Because they've basically now, they never resolve shit, but now they're together. They actually seem like they're getting along. And Harper's just like, no, you've been super generous, more than I deserve. Yaz then starts to get personal. She opens up that she's been seeing a lot of her dad. She's like, but I struggled to let him in completely. And Harper's like, well, he rejected you, so it makes sense. And Yaz's like, yeah, but it's a deeper fear. She says, what Ja Rule says, pain is loving. And then they laugh about the fact that Yaz says, I thought it was Ja Rule, not Ja Rule. But you can see
it's just hilarious because it's like, again, if it were in German or something like that, like the J-A would be pronounced Ja, right? So she's like this worldly linguist who speaks all these other languages and thinks that that's what Ja Rule's name is, right?
Yes.
Like, so it's this joke about, it's so funny, right? Because we sit here and joke about how like you don't know geography and all these things, but like you're so erudite when it comes to various other things. And it's like Yasmin doesn't get these pop culture things because she's too worldly and too smart, right?
That's so funny. But that's so true. I didn't even think of that. I was just like, I just thought it was like a inverse of the dumb American. It was like, but she's just doesn't know.
She's the too smart European.
The too smart European. That's so funny. So, and they're like I said, they're getting along, and Yaz is like, this is so nice.
Happy. I'm so happy. Our girls are back. We're friends again. Like we're willing to let it all be. To let bygones be bygones. I'm hoping.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And Harper then says, I have to tell you something. I thought I was going to see my brother here. I thought he worked here. I was messaging someone on Instagram and I convinced myself that he was. And I didn't want to come on a plane to call all the way over here if he wasn't. So when I found out you were on this trip, I basically got myself on it. And Yaz is like, let's go sit at home.
Let's go sit soft at home.
Yes.
That is the best phrase I have ever heard. I want to sit soft for the rest of my life. Like I want to be in sweatpants on the couch, like cuddled with a fire and like a glass of wine and a book. I sitting soft is my new everything. I think of it as bed rotting, but sitting soft sounds so much better.
Sitting soft. I guess that's true. And so anyway, so they get up, they go outside, and as they're walking away, Harper she's like, wait a second, no, I came all the way here. I gotta make sure he's not in there. So she goes back in.
Should have just walked away.
She should have just walked away, but she goes inside and she goes to the kitchen.
Like a crazy person, by the way.
Like a crazy person.
Crazed.
Yes. And she sees her brother. She freaking sees him and she's like, what the fuck? And her brother says, what are you doing in Berlin? And so Harper wants to go somewhere and talk with him. And he just keeps making up excuses. He's like, we've got plans. And he says to the guy who's like some other kitchen staff in German, he's like, we're going out tonight, right? And the guy was like, huh? And he's like, oh, it's family stuff. Again, in German, Harper doesn't speak German, but Yaz does. So Yaz obviously understands what's being said.
And she looks like so like uncomfortable and heartbroken for Harper because she's like, Harper's believing this lie that like her brother was really going to go out with his friends. And Yasmin's like, oh God, this is bad.
Yep. But anyway, Harper then goes up and gives her brother a hug. And Harper is so excited to see her brother, and her brother just wants nothing to do with her. But so anyway, next scene, we're with Robert and Venetia. And Venetia says she's smoking again because basically Pierpoint has her so stressed out. And she asks if Robert wants to get a drink like before dinner professionally. Although I do think that, you can tell she's a little crush on him.
Yeah.
And Robert says
after they've been bonding over their like shared background and perspective, they both feel that like, oh, we weren't good enough and we had to work our way up or whatever.
Yeah. Robert says he'd love to, but he has to catch up with an old friend. And so he then goes into a pub and the bartender sees him and is like, no fucking way. You didn't tell me you were coming. And Robert's like, well, I'm here for work, for recruitment. And the guy's like, you work in recruitment? He's like, no, finance.
By the way, in response to the bartender's question, oh, you work in recruitment, says, nah, finance. Much more complex and important. Okay. Like, okay, buddy.
The bartender is like, well, you should have told me you were coming. I would have cleared my evening for you. And Robert's like, well, I'm here now. Let's just go have a drink. Which, is a little bit like, here's this guy, solo bartender, like full pub of people. And it's not like he can just leave. So Robert's like, well, pour me a drink then, and he pulls out his credit card. And the other obnoxious dude is like, hey, mate, I was here first. So the bartender guy is like, well, wait a second. I gotta, pour these paying customers a beer.
The other customer at the bar is making fun of Robert's suit, by the way.
Oh, it was his suit. I wasn't sure if he was making fun of the bartender, but that makes sense that he's making fun of Robert.
No, he's making fun of Robert's suit. So Robert pulls out like the ultimate douchey banker move where he takes out a wad of cash, drops it on the bar and says, this is enough for my drink, that guy's drink, and everyone in here's next round. Mm-hmm. And immediately we find out that the bartender is in fact his dad.
Right. Which is, it's interesting because he ultimately calls Gus and Gus is like, why did you go see him? Like, why'd you see that asshole? And I didn't get the sense that his dad was an asshole. And like, again, we're going to learn out more later, but like, I actually thought that Robert was kind of not so much in the wrong, but like he's walking into this place. And again, obviously hasn't seen his dad. His dad doesn't even know he works in finance. He's been there for 3 years. And it's hard, right? Because again, it's his dad, but it's also like, I understand that. Like if you're working, it's not like you can just be like, hey guys, I'm going to leave. And there's like a whole bunch of people that need to be served. So it's
interesting because I'm with you. We don't have enough context at this point to understand why Robert's dad is horrible. Like we know that he wasn't supportive of Robert's aspirations to go to an elite college, that he's totally indifferent to his quote unquote high-powered career. Yeah. And that he
doesn't like respect it. He doesn't look up to it and put it on a pedestal.
With his mom. Yeah. Yeah. But like, there's a difference between being like, hey, I'm a working class dude. And like, I thought you were going to be a working class dude and whatever. And like, we don't see eye to eye versus you're a total asshole. You're a terrible father, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me, to your point, Robert's like, it's like, am I the asshole? Like, who's the, the asshole here? Like, I think Robert's waltzing in thinking he's like, what, the prodigal son returned? Yeah. And when his dad doesn't treat him as such, he basically throws a tantrum like a child. Yeah. Demands a bottle of champagne at this pub. He's like, oh, do you have a dusty one in the back? Yeah. Forces his dad to bring him a bottle of champagne. We know that Robert's sober. Opens it and chugs it alone in a corner. Again, to your point, was it worth the tantrum just based on the merits of this man, his father alone? Not to my eyes, but with the added context of how he's suffering through the loss of Clement. It's easier to understand Robert's perspective through that lens. We don't have
Well,
enough
he
evidence
lost-
to know that his dad's an asshole.
Right. He lost his father figure. So, which, by the way, we don't know why he's not close with his dad anymore. Like I said, he calls Gus and says he's at Oxford. Gus is like, well, don't go see that prick. And Robert says, I was unfair about him. So Robert is admitting that like maybe what he said to Gus about his dad might not be accurate, but it's going to be interesting again because so much of this, the theme of this is the perfectionism, the striving just for the sake of striving. And it's like, here's his dad who kind of just like wanted this good blue collar type job. And I mean, Robert probably looked down on him. I mean, it seems like his mom did. But anyway.
So much of this reminds me, especially something to keep in mind for the scene later at the recruiting dinner.
Yeah,
of that
which is
scene
what
at
we're
the
gonna
end of
get
The
to
Devil
next.
Wears Prada, where
Yeah.
Miranda Priestley turns to Anne Hathaway's character and is like, don't be silly. Everybody wants this,
Yeah.
right? Robert is acting like everyone wants what I have, right? Like I've done it. I have the thing that everybody wants. That's how he is acting in front of his dad. And that's how he ultimately acts in front of whatever her name is, Daphne.
Daphne Mason.
I just think that that's maybe like for me, the lens through which to view Robert's disappointment.
Yeah, well, and so that actually brings us to the next scene. So he snorts some Coke. He was sober before. He's now chugged an entire bottle of champagne, snorted some Coke. And now we see him at the grad dinner doing this hard sell to this girl. He says, trust me, once you've worked at Pierpoint, you've arrived. And the girl says, I sort of felt like that when I got in here, right, to Oxford. And Venetia pipes in saying, I totally agree. I smoked myself into an eating disorder when I was here. And the grad replies, I understand that all too well. I actually loved this episode because I loved this particular part of it, which is like this sort of type A personality, which is also like you have to be perfect with regards to how you look and like basically give yourself an eating disorder and blah, 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 blah. And it all is tied up together in like for a lot of people. But these two girls are sitting here basically being very vulnerable with each other, connecting. And Robert then jumps in again with this hard sell. He says, I mean, why would you train your whole life and then not take a gold medal? We're literally offering it to you. I mean, I read all about you because you're such a talked about property. I wanted to come meet the star. And in the back, by the way, you can actually see because I wanted to like try to just understand exactly what was going on with this dinner, because in the first season we had that weird like day where grads like showed up at Pierpoint. This is much more akin to what typically happens, which is like people go on campus. Now, usually you go on campus to also interview and like recruit and do info sessions. So this is a little different because like they're going to sell. Typically those sales types things tend to happen near the office because you're like, ooh, I'm going to show people London, or if you're in New York, you're going to bring people into New York and like take them to a fancy restaurant. So it's a little bit strange that it's almost like flipped. They're at this long table and there's multiple senior executives and people from Pierpoint because it says Oxford Financial Society sponsored by Pierpoint and Co. But the girl's being self-deprecating because he's talking about how she's a prize, which is, I think, offensive. And she's like, oh, cringe. But again, more referring to herself because she's being very almost like humble. And Robert replies, not at all. Own it. You've earned it. You've worked so hard. Why would you pass up the ultimate garland to your achievement? I mean, just imagine what it would mean to your parents. Yeah. Venetia then says, I'd hardly call it the ultimate garland. I mean, it's a finance job. She could do anything she wants. Try a softer sell. Geez. Because again, they had this amazing connection. Robert's now being a total dick. I mean, his personality has done a complete 180. And Robert
he's
then
also
says,
projecting how he felt about it,
yes,
right? This is the prize. I have it. I got it. Doesn't everybody want this? Why aren't you proud of me, Dad?
Yeah.
And he's like, don't you feel that way? And this woman's like, actually, like maybe not.
Well, I think that Daphne does. I think she's buying into it. It's Venetia who's sitting there horrified.
I think she looked off put at this point. I felt like she looked visibly uncomfortable.
She looked uncomfortable, but I think she's buying. I got the feeling she was buying a little bit of what he was selling.
I do think it shifts, but I think out of the gates he came on too strong.
He did come in. Oh yeah.
And I think it's reflected in her face. Like I actually thought he was like blowing it at this point. And then I think there's a moment where it turns. It really turns on Venetia.
He turns on Venetia because Venetia's like, it's a finance job. So he says to Venetia, then why do you work for us? Because you knew you were joining the best. You know, you two, you're the same, meaning Daphne and Venetia. The grad says we're the same in terms of sickness. Robert counters quality. You know you only want to join the best. You only feel satisfied, like existentially satisfied when you're achieving, correct? Daphne is like, yeah, I guess that's the case deep down. Not sure if it's a good thing. And Robert says, you're going to find out wherever you go, whether it's politics or whatever, you're going to find out that you've been buffeted around by market forces and competition and excess power and all that shit. But we don't cover any of that up. We're the market leaders in the worst stuff. It just so happens the worst is also the truest. So come along. Venetia's like, what are you talking about? And Robert's like, I'm teasing, obviously, but it's a practical choice for a girl of your intelligence. Venetia corrects him, woman, which was something we saw earlier with like DVD continually messing up saying girl. And she's like, woman. Yeah. And Robert says, and honestly, your anxiety about what to do next, all I'm saying is allay it. Give us a year. You'll learn a lot. You'll get paid more than any of your peers. And if you don't like it after a year, you're free to go. And Daphne replies, and if I get there and feel nothing? Robert says, well, then you're dead inside. Daphne laughs, and Robert says, you're looking at you in a year time, obviously nodding over to Venetia. You're an anxiety-ridden type A, and you love it. They laugh. Venetia says, they do everything they can to lock you in. And Daphne asks if she can get some water. And Robert turns to Venetia and says, do your fucking job. Yeah? And Daphne in the background is then changing her order. I thought that was so interesting. She initially asked for water. Then she says, you know what? Actually, port if you've got it. Which to me signals, actually, I think more of what you were saying.
Correct.
Which is she wasn't buying it at first.
Happens.
And then, yeah.
Yes. It's I wanted water. It's the Venetia, the buttoned up, the like, I have a soul, call me a woman, not a girl, like all these things, right? Because remember, Venetia was that grad being like, what about the lack of senior women representation at the firm back in episode 1? She and Robert have this shared striving, but she has these like deep core principles and nose in the air attitude that she's unwilling to compromise. Robert has compromised so much, right? Like this is what he wants and he's willing to do anything he can for it, like whether it be with Nicole or whatever it is. That last sentence of, then you're dead inside, which it's funny. It's like, okay, well, that's a horrifying thing to say. But I think she's like, maybe I am going to get what I want. And as she comes back after changing her drink order from water to alcohol, he says, now let's talk about the potential pathway to you running a desk. So all of a sudden you can see kind of the light of ambition turn on and Venetia has walked off.
Yeah. Yep. So next scene, we're back in Berlin and Harper and her brother are at the club. And so this was why I thought it was interesting. They mentioned the techno music when she was talking to her dad, when Yaz was talking to her dad, because now they're in a club and like you can't hear a single thing. Basically the entire communication is happening over closed caption. So it's like thump, thump, thump. Harper is trying to ask about his life. And it's almost like he took her here so that like they wouldn't be able to talk
to her.
Exactly. He took her to a place that was the most impossible to talk. Yaz is talking to the chef and asking what drug he's taking, which is 2CI. I had to look up what that is. It's a psychedelic like LSD or MDMA. And Harper's brother, we find out his name is John Daniel or JD. And he says, give me one. And so the chef says, are you sure you want to do this? The brother says, yes. And Harper says, I didn't know you were into this sort of stuff. He says, well, maybe look a little closer then. Yasmin asks the chef if he has any coke. The chef replies, the guy in the bathroom has some speed. And Yasmin then takes some of whatever that weird drug is that JD took. So next, Harper and Yaz go outside. And she says to Yaz, she's like, I've never seen him take a drink before. He was an athlete. And Yaz says, don't you think you should talk? And Harper says, well, he's not a big talker. So what? And Yaz is like, I'm not judging, right? I'm just commenting objectively. And Harper starts to get pissy. And she says, well, don't comment objectively. Do it on your own shit. And
I'm so annoyed by Harper. She's so shitty. Why can't she be a
so
normal
mean
friend
to
for
her.
5 minutes? This happens all the time. She takes everything out on Yasmin. I hate how she does that.
She does. And Yaz says, because it's so fun. I mean, it's so true. She says, I can't be objective about my own shit, only yours, which is true, right?
That's what it's like as a friend.
Exactly. And Harper then replies, then just don't fucking involve yourself.
Cool. They were friends for 5 minutes again. Glad that happened.
They were friends for 5 minutes. She says, then you have your shit. I have my shit. Let's deal with our own fucking shit. And then she walks away. So I'm with you. Harper, stop. Like she lashes out at people when she's upset. And it's just like, stop. Like,
stop.
No. I mean, Yaz is being so kind to you. She's letting you stay at her place. It just pisses me off. So anyway, Harper then goes back inside and she finds her brother. They leave. They go outside together. And then they're going and climbing into, I assume, the restaurant that he works at.
Yeah, they break back into the restaurant. So again, kitchen season. We're just going to kitchens all the time. I don't know why we're breaking into this restaurant.
I know. And Harper admits that she figured out where he was through someone who named Helene. And he says that Helene doesn't party. And Harper's just like, well, I didn't think you did either. And JD says, well, I don't anymore. I'm 6 months sober. So this is, again, why it's so interesting. Right, was 6 months sober, where it's like you had both Robert, who was obviously like an alcoholic, doing drugs, blah, blah, blah. And he was sober until he had these problematic encounters with family. And same thing with JD. He was sober for 6 months and then his sister shows up and now he's like doing LSD and God knows what else.
Then there's Yasmin, who was never sober, who's spiraling, doing random drugs with people in Berlin nightclubs because of family.
Right. So basically, we know her brother was an athlete. And I think it's funny because Harper really idolized him and his talent. And it's so funny how he looked at it completely differently. I mean, and she says, I never understood why you left at your peak. Arrival fallacy. I didn't understand that. Do you know what that means?
It's this whole thing of like, when you get to the thing that you want, I've arrived, I've gotten the job, I've gotten the tennis career, whatever it is that these characters are getting.
Oh,
right?
I see. Yes.
Is the idea that you can arrive at your destination just a total fallacy. And I think that's what all of these characters are finding, right? Because she's like, I thought you had it all. And he's like, I hate it. It was empty, right? Robert is telling Daphne, don't you, like, you are now going to seize all the things that you want and it's going to be empty.
Well, and she said, I felt like I had arrived when I got to Oxford.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, so that's,
like, But it's this Pyrrhic victory. And I think that that's the theme. When you finally make it, it's empty for so many of these people because whatever.
Well, and that people talk about it all the time. It's like you win the Olympic gold medal and it's like, shit, what do I do now?
The next day is the worst day of your life or whatever.
Yeah. Because you literally just achieved your goal and it's like, what else do you have now? So he goes on to talk about how his mother was wildly abusive. And right before he would play, I guess her mom said something like, if you don't win, you don't have a place to sleep, essentially. And so Harper's like, well, she was a fucking bitch. She was a fucking bitch. We both know that. And JD says, yeah, but you were the one who forced me back out there. And Harper's confused. She's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, perfection. I did everything I could to be 100% perfect. Forced practice, hitting all the time, chronic pain, hours of tape in a dark room. And I'd get fixated on the weirdest shit. You know, like I'd be watching and be like, your weight's on the wrong foot. And keep harping on it. And Harper's like, why didn't you tell me any of this? And he says, you were indoctrinated. The cult of our family. Harper's like, I ran away too. I mean, I think he's being very unfair to her. And she then is angry and is just like, why do I feel like you're not talking to me? Then she starts to apologize. She's like, I should have asked. I'm asking now. And he then just says, fuck it, let's go. It's so interesting because I don't normally like Harper. Like she's like a terrible, terrible person. I think her brother is being so unfair here. We know she's a narcissist and they talk about that too. But like, I don't know. I don't know how you felt. Like this whole episode with her brother.
I don't like Harper and I don't like her brother. Harper's brother is doing exactly to Harper what she does to everybody else. He's like, you made me have a breakdown. You were a co-conspirator with my mom. She's like, I was encouraging you because
she was trying to help.
I thought these were your goals. If they weren't your goals, you should have said something. Yaz has been nothing but supportive to Harper. And Harper's like, fuck you. You're trying to steal everything from me. And it's like, no, isn't. So this is just apparently who these twins are. They blame everybody else for their problems except themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I don't like Harper's brother in the same way I don't like Harper because they think all their problems and their panic attacks are everybody else's fault.
Mm-hmm. So next scene, we're with Yaz. And Yaz is like, again, she's high on LSD. She's sitting in the office in this Berlin house and she's looking at the photo. And then
like
she starts
ransacking it.
She starts looking through, ransacking the drawers. And she ultimately finds an address book and finds Teresa's address. So she then goes to Teresa's and says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here. I think it was a mistake. So it seems that she actually had come the night before,
she comes
sick
in the
everywhere.
Middle, she goes in the middle of the night.
Yes.
We then flash to the next morning at daylight when we learn that Yasmin got so drunk and high that she vomited and Teresa had to take care of her.
Exactly. So Yaz asks if she's still close to Maxim and Teresa's basically like, no.
She seems very uncomfortable when she asks her about Maxim.
Yes. And I actually don't think we ever really understand why. But she says
we understand why because Maxim has been managing her father's money and handling the distribution of these payouts to the women who he's covering up.
Oh, that makes sense. 100%. Okay. It was so funny. I'm like, why isn't she close to Maxim? And I'm like, oh, okay. But so she says, can I help you with something? And Yaz asks her point blank, like, did you have a relationship with my father? And she says, yeah, we had a relationship. And Yaz asks how long? And Teresa said, this is inappropriate. Yaz asks why, because he took his money. And he paid for all of this.
Again, gorgeous kitchen, another gorgeous real estate. So I was like, this nanny has a nice house.
Yes. And the nanny replies, no, because you're going to wake up my daughter. She then adds, you know that legally I can't speak about any of this. Why are you asking me? And Yaz is like, well, how old is your daughter? Basically saying, do I have a sister I don't know about?
This
like
is my
a half-sister?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Which it definitely is.
Yeah.
And Teresa then says, if I was legal, if that's what you're asking, yes. So Yaz now finds out that she basically possibly has this half-sister and her dad was sleeping with her nanny.
Don't go looking for answers you don't want to find. Don't go asking questions you don't want to know the answer to, you know? Like Yasmin clearly knew in her heart, and getting this verification, like what has that done for her?
Yeah, no, it's only made things worse. So next scene, this is very strange. I was confused about this. Next scene, Harper and her brother are in some random person's house and they basically start doing crystal meth.
In some dude's apartment that he seems to have some kind of intimate relationship with.
Yes. Well, it seems like he's almost like sleeping with him to like get drugs is my,
that's my take as well.
Impression
that
I got.
He was sleeping with this guy to get access to crystal meth, from which he has been 6 months sober and has now relapsed. That was my take on what was happening in this scene. So I was like, wow, this is pretty dark. This isn't just like, I wasn't drinking for 6 months.
Yeah, this is up there with Clement, possibly even like worse.
Not an expert in these things, but don't do crystal meth, don't do heroin, please don't do any of these things. Like,
no, like why? I mean, again, like this, you know, it's so funny. We had one of the nicest comments ever. Someone wrote on YouTube to us. They were like, I swear if the people who work at the Emmys listen to your podcast, like this show would be nominated for some like awards and stuff, which again, I love the show. But the point though, is that like, I feel like though, then they like throw this like weird shit in and you're like, but this isn't really additive. It's just kind of pushing the envelope. And then I feel like it almost takes away from the stuff that's so good.
It like, I would have loved something subtler.
Like you can
and Harper joins in. So Harper is comfortable just casually doing crystal meth. Like, oh my God. I mean, if you know an investment banker who's doing crystal meth, Jesus Christ, like this is a lot.
It's exactly. So this was my least favorite plot point and I'm so glad that it's going to be gone. But anyway.
Next scene, this is the end.
Yeah. We don't have to see the brother ever again. And we never have to hear about him again. This is
so
the end.
Glad they wrapped
We've gotten there. We're wrapping it up. It's gone forever unless it pops back up in season 4 because that is not out yet, but it's not, I will tell you at least it is not in season 3. So next scene, we see Robert wake up in the middle of the road. Like he was obviously super trashed and he's outside his dad's house. His father opens the door and lets him in. And Robert comments on the decorations looking good. I thought this was so strange. The dad's like, we never took them down. So I assume he means that they basically left them up all year.
They leave their Christmas decorations up all year?
Well, because the Christmas season hasn't passed. So it's like the Christmas decorations are up. To say we never took them down, it would be one thing if it was like June, but it's not. It's like, it's before Christmas because we saw the Christmas tree. I still have
Christmas decorations on my front porch. It's January 24th.
Oh, I do too. But I'm saying, like, we saw the Christmas decorations at the Pierpoint offices, so we know that it is that time of year. I feel like Harry Potter is a Christmas theme
movie. It is.
movie, so like it all is Christmas theme. So the fact that he's saying we never took them down to me means that they were up all year. Yeah. But his dad then says, you fucking overdid it again, didn't you? Eat something solid for fuck's sake. You look like shit for a handsome lad. And Robert replies, basically, it's a good thing I look like my mom. Robert then says, she was a tyrant, And Bob Sr. replies, good word for her. She was a bit ... Yeah. And Robert says, she said horrible shit about you. And his dad says, she said horrible shit to my face. Don't worry about that. She was restless, just like you. She was in your ear a lot about how you should be and look. That's fine. Just because I wasn't doesn't mean I didn't, which I assume means just because I wasn't in your ear, like doesn't mean that I didn't care about you. And Robert then starts to say, Dad, and he starts to tear up. He says, the last few years haven't been very, and his dad says, hey, you don't owe me anything. It's always day one with us. And then in the background, you can hear Oh Holy Night playing, A New and Glorious Morning, which they actually have played throughout the rest of this episode. And Robert asks, are your kids in? To which Robert Sr. says, your brothers? Yes, I was about to go get them up. And so his dad then goes to his kids and you hear him say, your brother is here. And Robert looks at the mantle and there's a photo of his mom and 2 boys. He's not in that photo. So again, it's his mom and the 2 brothers. And then he takes a bunch of money out of his pocket. He throws it on the table before he leaves. And that just made me so sad because I think that you were exactly right when you made the comment that he thought he had to be this thing and he was almost upset that his dad didn't see it that way. And his dad was like simpler and had this blue collar job. And his mom was the one that was like, you need to be at Oxford. You need to do these prestigious things. And he did it. And then his dad probably like didn't give him the validation. I don't know, but it's so sad to me. And then it's like your brothers and he doesn't even stick around to see his brothers. Like,
and I'm so confused. Are the brothers biologically full brothers of his? Are they half brothers?
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe
I was confused
that's
about
a good
that.
point. That would make more sense.
Robert's like 25 probably now, right? He's at least a 3rd-year analyst.
His mom died, call it 6 years ago. So his dad would have had to get remarried and then have kids. Which,
well, he says, I'm going to get them up, which to me tells me they're little. Like,
yeah. Well, and you saw in the pictures. You saw in the pictures how old they were. They looked like they were.
Yeah, but I
just
couldn't tell if it was
5.
an old picture. Like, I was just confused. Like, are
oh,
these
that's
his?
a good point. No, that must be. Oh, that must be his new wife. Actually, that must be it because those kids couldn't have been 5 if he had to get them up.
Right.
And so it must be a new wife. It must be a new wife.
That's what I was trying to
right.
understand.
You're 100%
but it wasn't
right.
clear to me. Maybe when he says your brothers, like
it's half brothers.
There's this feeling that his dad started over. Like,
yes.
And started, like,
That's
I'm going to have a fresh start with these. Robert is the black sheep who's the remnant of kind of the old life and this old wife whom I didn't see eye to eye with.
That's 100% it. Yep. Again,
yeah.
that totally tracks. Because again, the fact that these kids were 5 and then with the mom, it had to be. So that's 100% it. Also explains why he's not in the photo. Like
he's not in the photo. Yeah. That's like the new family.
So as he leaves, he's then walking across Oxford campus and he gets this message from Nicole. Remember in the prior episode, he was ignoring her. He had feelings for her, found out that she had made a move on Harper and is upset about that. And Nicole says, hey, it's Nicole, your client. Look, obviously I don't miss you or anything, but you're my coverage. So I expect you to return your call. And then the second message is DVD saying that here you had a great time last night. Great fucking work. Daphne's in. So Holy Night keeps playing. It's like, hear the angels' voices. And then we then see in the next scene, he's at Christ Church and it's still singing that song and he's in the choir. So I think that it was true that he was a choir boy.
Yes.
And Venetia's there in the audience because she says she likes to go to that. And I actually liked that scene. It's like, I like that song. I think that's why I love that song.
Yeah. I am actually really surprised at my feelings about Nicole missing Robert. I find myself against my will thinking their relationship is weirdly sweet. Like, oh, like she does care about him and like that is such like abusey mentality. Like this is such an inappropriate relationship. Like she was 100% abusing her sales coverage all up and down the street. And like, now that she's developed feelings for Robert doesn't necessarily make that okay, right? But like I'm weirdly, or do you feel that way? Am I like, is this Stockholm syndrome?
No, I think what it is, it's so funny, right? Like all these shows, depending how they portray people episode to episode, you can really like and be sympathetic to somebody, even if they're horrible. But then it's like, then they'll come back. You know what I mean? Like, I think it really depends on kind of how they're portrayed in that particular episode.
It is also just a testament to the writers that they can make me feel that way about someone who was so outrageously inappropriate that I'm like, oh, like that's sweet. She left you a voicemail.
She left you a voicemail. She says she doesn't miss you.
She must love you.
So next scene here, we're back with JD and Harper again.
Thought we were done with the brother.
I can go quickly through this because I just don't really fucking care. Long story short, they're high on crystal meth. Harper is trying to tell her brother to come back to London because she makes enough money to support him. JD is just like, you're not capable of love. You're a fucking narcissist. And then he's like, I'm going to go and call Helene. And it ends basically with her saying, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything to get you back in my life. And like I said, he calls Helene and says, I'm so sorry. I need you. Because we know that almost like she's probably his girlfriend, like sober person.
They have some
and
complex relationship where like she was trying to get him sober. He's screwed up. He's asking to get out of this hole that Harper has dragged him back down into. Again, with the whole panic attack about the stupid exam, like all this stuff, this whole plot line never
needed to happen.
Felt authentic to me.
Yes.
And I don't think he's being fair to Harper objectively, given the facts they've presented. However, I don't like this whole plot line. I don't like him. I don't like her. It just doesn't feel real to me.
The irony is what he's saying to her is kind of exactly what we have felt about her, seeing her interactions with Eric.
Yeah, she's a narcissist.
Which it's all 100% true. But the problem is that, I mean, the messenger, given the circumstances, like, it just doesn't make sense, even though it is true. And like someone should have said it.
He's totally unsympathetic. You're just like, okay, sorry, everyone wanted you to be a great tennis player. It must have been so rough, everybody like trying to get you to succeed.
I wish that they had actually just with that plot point, like made it something where there was something more that she had done that was like actually bad. Because this is not anything she did that was actually bad. You're like, this is so stupid. I mean, unless it was trying to be like, this is kind of how Harper is to Yaz all the time. And it's like a taste of her own medicine.
This is 100% how Harper is to Yaz. None of it makes any sense to treat people like this. None of it rings true. It rings very false to me. Again, this could happen in someone's real life experience. I'm not saying that this wasn't possible. I'm saying that for the purposes of the character development they're trying to achieve, I don't think it was successful.
Yeah, it felt like this was a loose end that had to be wrapped up. And like, again, we're not going to have to see him or hear about the stupid plotline ever again. So thank God.
I just wish that they felt that way. They were like, oh yeah, we got to do something with the Harper brother plotline that we never really wrote, and we have to get rid of it.
And we thought that way. We felt that way from the beginning. So whatever. It's gone now, thank God. And now we're to the last scene, which to your like this is a good scene. Yeah. This is a good scene. So we're now with Harper, Yaz, Jackie, and they're all in Anna's office, and it is so
let's
funny.
Set the stage because
Well,
okay, everyone's been vomiting in this episode, so we've got Yasmin, who has just like basically crawled off the floor of her nanny's beautiful kitchen, having been like drunk, high, vomited everywhere, and now found out this like terrible family secret. We've got Harper, who was smoking crystal meth 5 minutes ago, who is now in this office looking like shaky, jittery, and has just been totally rejected by her brother. And we have our beloved Jackie,
who's the same one
of the vile phrase, who is totally buttoned up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and like ready to do business. So the irony abounds, right? You have her, remember they talked about flanking her into this intro, that they were going to be the warm introduction that was going to like elevate Jackie so she could finally be the beneficiary of these relationships. And of course, it's completely turned on its head. And Yasmin and Harper are a mess. And Jackie is totally left holding the bag alone.
And it's so funny because at the very beginning, I think it was DVD or Rishi who's like, I can't believe they let that hoodlum in front of clients. And now it's like, I can't believe they let those hoodlums, right? It's Harper and Yaz who are absolutely disasters in front of clients.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so they're like, here, we're passing the baton. And we hear Jackie give a pitch. And she's actually like, you know, she's pretty good. It's funny to see her acting normally because we've never seen how she acts professionally. We've heard her like ragging people on the phone, being inappropriate. But here, you know, she's trying to impress, she's doing a pitch, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you know, I know these are big boots to fill. Like, you'll be out of the totality of the firm and United Front. And Anna's like, I'm sorry, we're losing you, Yaz. And she's like, well, but maybe if things go well, you'll be covering me in PWM. Yaz is like, something to aspire to. So Anna then apologized about pushing back the meeting. And it's just like, look, I don't need to tell you about the rumors that have been circulating the past couple of days because we know about the Amazon rumors about them acquiring Fast Aid. She said, it would be super bearish for my right-hand position and win those NHS contracts. And then she asked Harper what her view is. Harper, like clearly this is the first she's hearing of it. And she's just trying not to throw up. And she's just like, it's unsubstantiated. And Anna says, Jesse said he hasn't been able to get a hold of you. Jackie pipes in, she goes, sounds like a shit show inside of a shitstorm. And she then talks about how I like to be very transparent about hedging stuff, price levels. You know, I imagine it's a side issue for equity investors, so I'm really just pain relief. Anna's like, perfect. Asks Harper if she's okay. Harper's like, yeah, just a slight fever, I think. And Jackie then trying to keep the tone upbeat. She's like, guys, can you feel that? That energy? There's not a single penis in this room. And Anna starts laughing and even starts snorting and says this bitch is hilarious. So the good news for them is that Jackie has, I mean,
won the day. She saved
thank God for Jackie. Yeah. Who is the last person.
The unlikeliest person we expected to pull this meeting off. And she's the one who does it.
Yes. So anyway, the episode ends where They're all back on the trading floor. We see Yaz, we see Harper, we see Robert. All obviously had these disastrous encounters with their family. And ultimately, this whole episode wraps up where DVD and Harper are in the elevator. He's asking her why she hasn't talked to him at all and asks if she caught up with her brother in Berlin. And she's being cold. So he asks if something happened. He says, did you, I don't know, like sleep with someone or something? And Harper turns to him stone cold and says, is that all your imagination is capable of? That I slept with someone? What if I did? She then gives him a death glare. And then the doors open. Eric walks in and Carol of the Bells comes on. And they all just stand there awkwardly as the music gets more intense. And Harper then says to DVD, I'm fine. Maybe you just don't like what you're looking at. I actually kind of liked that ending, but she's so horrible. It's like this episode opened where, I mean, she thought that DVD was going to say he loved her, and then it closes with her just completely pushing him away and just being an absolute bitch.
Well, and again, back to the what you see is what you get with him. You know, what you see is what you get with Harper, and there's not much to like. She has given her client terrible advice. Her brother has told her she's a narcissist and, you know, wants nothing to do with her. She is the shittiest friend ever to Yasmin and continues to be and has been since the beginning. And I do not understand her perspective of being so resentful and hateful towards Yasmin. I just do not. And
I'm with you.
Now she's turning on DVD as well. And I think it's just Eric in the background being like, that's my girl.
Well, it's almost like the comic relief that, yeah. Well, that also, I mean, DVD had shot Eric in the back, but it's like they all basically have been terrible to each other.
Everyone's terrible. Everyone's terrible.
So who are we bullish on, Jen? At the end of that episode, who are we bullish on?
This episode actually really humanized Venetia for me. I really haven't liked Venetia, that we've talked about her performative feminism. And it's funny because I think they showed it through the lens of like, oh, that girl, I mean, woman. You know, and by the way, I'm guilty of that all the time. All the time. I'm like, oh my God, that girl over there. We're 40, right? Like we're not, you know, but I just say that. And
I would still call people my age.
It.
Honestly, I think these days, like if someone calls me a girl, I'm like, thank you. It's much better than ma'am. The worst is when we get like an Instagram comment and someone calls us ma'am. And I'm like, F you. Not a ma'am.
Ma'am. Well, I live in the South. So like we say like
so
no ma'am a lot, but you say it in a sassy way. Yeah. So I'm bullish on Venetia. Bearish. Ugh. Well, I'm bearish on Harper, but I'm like almost always bearish on Harper. I have a feeling things are not going to go well for Jesse and Harper in the near term, as all of a sudden this information about the investment that she told him to make is going to come to light. So I'm particularly bearish on that front, and I want to see how the finance plays out. But I'm bearish on Robert because Robert is really, it feels like he's adrift. It felt like he was starting to find his footing bizarrely through this relationship with Nicole. And now I feel like he's adrift again. How about you?
I'm bullish on Gus because it seems like he got a little promotion. I don't exactly know what that means because I don't understand the way that politics work in the UK, but seems like it's a good promotion to get. And honestly, bearish on, I mean, Harper, like shit looks really bad. I mean, she basically told Jesse to dump. I mean, we know that his initial, it was like $3 billion worth of stock that he bought from Reikan, and then he bought more. So I don't know, $4 billion investment that's about to go down the shitter. I mean, that doesn't look great. So I'm bearish on Harper.
And he's short the thing that should go
and he's
to the
short.
moon.
Forgot about that.
Because it's about to be announced as an acquisition target.
Yeah, it's all bad. So I'm very bearish on Harper. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited for the next episode. I want to see what happens. And, poor Yaz. Just figure it out, Yaz. Everyone stop doing drugs. Like,
stop doing drugs. The drugs, like, I mean, this is why people, honestly, maybe those 80s, like, commercials need to come back. It's like, I remember, it's like, this is your brain on drugs. And it's just like
bring
a
back
fried
the scrambled eggs.
Bring it back. So thank you guys. Again, if you have not already done so, please leave us a written 5-star review. It really helps us. Share the show with a friend, and we will see you next week.